You young whippersnappers have no respect! I'm haunting you all now as a ghost! Boo! Tremble before me!
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Cranky Old Historian, and I am John McKay, the Cranky Old Historian. And today I want to do things a little different. Number one, let me tell you right off the bat, I'm going to be talking some things about hospitals and healthcare that if you are in the hospital or about to go to the hospital, you probably don't want to hear. So you might want to skip this episode. So go ahead and watch it later or don't watch it all. God bless you. Hope you get better soon, and just don't watch this because it's got some things you don't want to hear right now. That said, I am a historian. I was a paramedic, all this other stuff. So technically, I'm a person that does not believe in metaphysics. I don't believe in supernatural things. Well, quite the opposite is true. I very much believe them because I've seen them. And I have had experiences. And I'm going to give you a story about one encounter I had. This is the first of a series of what I'm going to do of ghost stories. And as a historian, especially a historian of the Civil War, I'm frequently asked, do you have any ghost stories? Have you ever seen a ghost? Yes, I have ghost stories. Yes, I have seen them. No, they're not ghosts. And let me preface everything by talking about another podcast. There is a podcaster named Sean Ryan. You may or may not have heard of him. He is an ex-Navy SEAL, ex-CIA operative, and he runs a fascinating podcast. I mean, this is a really, really good podcast. He does long-form interviews with people, fascinating people. He started off by doing just operators, PJs, SEALs, Rangers, Special Forces, those kind of guys. Then he had a crisis of faith and came to the Lord, came to the knowledge of the Lord. And since then, he's changed up a little bit. He's opened up some. You can tell he's very much seeking. And he's interviewing some real interesting people. And one of the later interviews he's had, one of the more recent shows he's had, is with a Catholic exorcist, Father, and I can't think of his name right off the top of my head. I'm sure Pett will put it down here below. And he is one of the leading exorcists in the United States and in the world. Written several books on the subject. Obviously very busy with doing that. Very interesting guy. And this was a 4-hour-long interview that felt like it was 30 minutes. There was so much to it. And in there, he said a number of things that really caught my attention. And he said, number one, something that I've believed for a long time now. There is no such thing as ghosts. You think that's your dead grandmother hanging around the room at the top of the stairs? No, that's not her. There very much are things as demons. And yes, they can manifest themselves. They can pretend to be certain people. They enjoy doing this. Why? Because they hate you. They hate you worse than the Democrats hate a documented voter. Sorry, I probably need to cut that one. They hate you with a passion. Why? Because they're fallen. If you're not up on your demonology, demons are fallen angels. They're creations of God. And their leader is Satan, who is known as Lucifer, the god of the angel of light. He was the praise and worship leader in heaven. He led all the worship choirs. I love to point that out to worship leaders in church today. They're never amused by it, though. And he decided he would revolt against God and place himself higher than God. So God just smote him down to earth. I saw him falling to earth like a meteor. That's what Christ said. And he took a third of the angels with him. Well, that's one thing this exorcist had to say. Sean asked him, how many demons are there? How many angels are there? Well, that's an interesting concept. We only know the names of a handful. There's only a handful of names said in Scripture. But according to this Catholic priest, and I don't disagree with this, but I'm not sure it's well supported in Scripture. Every person who's ever lived has had a guardian angel. There's been roughly 17 billion people on this earth. So that's 17 billion angels just for that. And then a third on top of that of the total, which were demons, who was not your guardian angel. And then you have others in doing various other duties. There's a hierarchy of angels. And he also talked about there's a hierarchy of demons also, which I thought was quite interesting. I'm interested in demonology. I'm interested because I've had so many encounters with it. And the other thing he said was, Sean asked him, well, can an object or a place be possessed by a demon like a human can be? Oh, yes, absolutely. Matter of fact, that's in Scripture. And of course, my mind is a sieve, so I cannot remember the chapter and verse, though I'm sure Pett will put it down below here. But in Scripture, Jesus encounters a demonic, a person who has been possessed by demons, and who was harming himself, and a wild man. And he asked him, and said, he was talking to the demons. He said, because the demons were, we know who you are. You've come early. Why are you here? What business do you have with us? They're scared to death because they know who he is. The demons know who he is. That's really saying something. And they're terribly frightened of him because they know what's going to happen to them eventually. They're just so overcome with anger and hate that they can't bring themselves to leave it. And so he says, what is your name? I said, well, I am Legion because there's so many of us. That was a ancient Near East way of saying, kind of an offhand way of saying, oh, there's a whole peapot full of us. It's not meant to be an exact number, even though a legion's 1,000 soldiers. So there's a whole bunch of them in there. And and they say, please do not send us out to die on the plain or whatever. But can we go into this herd of pigs? Can we go from this to that? And he gives them permission to do so, which they do. They infest this herd of pigs that's right there. So number one, they can infest other things. Number two, anything that a demon infests, it tries to destroy. It tries to destroy its host because its hatred of everything is that intense. And so then the pigs, they do this to the pigs. The pigs immediately rush off the cliff and drown. Which, okay. The whole thing, getting back to that, Sean asked him, how many, when he told the story, asked the exorcist this, he said, well, how many demons have you ever dealt with at one time? He said, well, in one person, 27. 27? Oh, yeah. He said, I called her the human vacuum cleaner because she would just walk down the street and pick up another one. She was just that way. He said, it's not uncommon to have people with more than one demon that are possessed, but it's usually like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. I mean, 27's an outrider. Okay. So in other words, you can have places infested on, and I have felt this as a historian, as a Civil War historian. There's battlefields I just do not feel comfortable in going back to. There's one in Northwest Georgia I will not go back to. I have had a demonic encounter there. I did not know that's what it was at the time. Nothing happened to me. It was disturbing but not frightening when it happened. And then later I was told the whole story about what went on in that place, and I realized this is what I had encountered, was this famous demon that's in the area. In healthcare is a place that is not a very happy place, especially hospitals. And in there, this Catholic exorcist also talks about how demons feed off of negative energy and negative emotions. Well, I'm here to tell you, you're not going to get much worse of a place than a hospital. Not much good goes on in a hospital. And lots of negative emotion, lots of pain, lots of agony. They're not fun places to work at all. They're terrible places to work. And some of the things that go on in there, you sort of question, like, well, did this really happen? Did that really happen? I don't know. But tonight I want to tell you a story, or today I want to tell you a story about something that is not a isolated, I'm out in the woods and I ran into Sasquatch kind of thing. This is one where I had an encounter along with at least a couple of dozen other people of a demon inside an ICU. And let me explain that. Now, in the summer of 1981, I worked at Georgia Baptist Medical Center in Atlanta, which later became Atlanta Medical Center, which later closed and is now torn down and gone. So I guess I can safely talk about where it was I worked because it doesn't exist anymore. The charge nurse for the shift, I worked at night shift, was the recovering debutante, my current wife, TRD, or my wife of my youth. I met her there. We met each other, and we instantly took a intense dislike to each other, so we had to get married later. That's a great story. I'll tell that one later in context with something else. But that's where we met, and my job was to watch the cardiac monitors to let the nurses know, hey, we don't have a heartbeat on this guy, or there's some weird rhythm here that I don't recognize. Come over here and take a look at this. And to be a general scut runner, just whatever needed doing. For example, TRD really hates snot. Really hates snot. So guess who got to empty the suction bottles? Yay, that was fun. And here's the truth about hospitals. Every room you go into, every room and every bed someone has died in. At least one. Probably multiple, and maybe within the hour of you being placed in that bed. That's the truth of hospitals. I mean, the people die there. And are they cleaned? Yes, sort of. I asked TRD to come on the show today and discuss this particular point. We were talking this morning about this show, and I was telling her I was going to tell this story. And I said, why don't you come on and talk about it? She said she didn't feel comfortable in talking about things she had very direct and supervisory knowledge of. Okay, even though she's been retired for some years. But here's what she said. She said, look, when the beds are clean, number one, we know this, when someone dies, the fluids come out. Okay, enough said. It's a little soup of fluids. It smells atrocious. It's very, very bad stuff. You don't want to get on your skin. You don't want to touch it. It's cleaned up. All that stuff is wiped up. They take the contaminated linens, and they take them off to be washed, and then they will squirt down the bed with something, and hopefully it's something effective that will kill 99.9% of germs or something like that. And wipe it down, and they might wipe down the sides of the mattress maybe, and every once in a while they'll get the side rails, and then every once in a blue moon they might get the bed rails and all that, just maybe. But here's the deal, they're under tremendous pressure. Hospitals are very overcrowded these days, extremely overcrowded, and there is a lot of pressure to turn over a bed, especially when someone's died. Nothing more you can do for them. Let's turn them over. We've got patients waiting for a bed. So you turn it over and then you're there. Now, that's something unpleasant to think about as you're lying there, number one. Number two, as this exorcist said, demons can infest places as well as people. And I can't think of a more apt place than someone where multiple people have died. There's lots of pain. There's lots of negative emotion. This would attract them. Like a politician to a vote, it would attract them. So, of course, they're going to be there. So, it's no real surprise that there would be ghosts or demons in places like this, especially an older hospital like Georgia Baptist was. Now, this was a newer part of the building, but it was still an older Atlanta institution at the time. TRD had actually gone to nursing school there in the 70s and then stayed on and was eventually in the ICU. And that's where we met. Well, this particular night in question, we were sitting there, and we worked at nights. I was in paramedic school during the day, so I worked at night. We had a nurse with us. I'll call her Carol. That's not her name. but I don't think we had a Carol working with us. So let's call her just Carol. And Carol was somebody that would attract a lot of bad attention these days from powers that be. Back then, she's a nurse. She's fully qualified. Let's put her in ICU. No problem. She was a squirrely character on any level. She was very thin, rail thin, very pale. Yeah, we worked at night, but come on, this was ridiculous. She always wore long sleeves and usually a sweater on top of that. And this is in the summertime. Now, it is cooler in that unit at night, but not that cool. And when you're running around doing stuff, you get warm. You know, I wore my short sleeve uniform. I was perfectly comfortable the whole night. She would take hour-long bathroom breaks in the middle of the night and come back all happy and upbeat, which should have been a massive clue. But back then, we weren't really looking at impaired nurses. We weren't really looking at impaired anything in medical field, because, you know, who would do that? Medications were missing. Back then, today, if you ever watch nurses when they get your pills for you, they'll go to a card and it's got a key, the drug card. They'll open it up, and you'll usually have like a big card with blister pack on it, like you'll get from the drugstore for certain kind of over-the-counters. And this is for any pill, and most hospitals and facilities have this kind of thing now of some sort. And it's only for you. You punch it out so you can see all the remaining pills right there and count them, because they're counted at the end of shift, every one of them. Back then they were too, but back then they weren't like this. They were, if you had an injectable like morphine or something, then you'd have a big vial of it, and it would have 30 or 35 doses in that vial, and you take out what you needed and then put it back in the med card. And the pills usually came in big bottles, and you just count out how many pills you needed and put in the little paper cup and take it into the patient. Junkies learned that if they were, or pill junkies as we call them, if they wanted morphine, it was real easy. They would take out what they wanted from the vial, 1 or 2 milligrams or even more, and then take the same amount of sterile water or saline and inject it and put it back into that bottle. So you're looking at the bottle, okay, it looks the same. And it might have even been marked on the side, okay, this is the last dose that we are rated as taken out. Okay, it's back to that level. It's at that level, so no problem. But then you notice patients weren't getting the therapeutic effect, the clinical effect that they should have been getting. So something's off on those. So this is why things changed, but back then this is the way things were. So we had this junkie nurse, and we all kind of knew it. But what are you going to do about it? So we're up there. This corner room, and the ICU was weird. It was not round, it was square. And every room had a big picture window that you could close off with a curtain for privacy if you need to, and a doorway. So you could see every patient really well, except for this one corner room. And it only had the doorway. You couldn't see into it very well at all from any angle. It just was at an odd angle. And we didn't use it except for overflow when we absolutely had to have that bed. And I don't think it even had a bed in it at that time. And it didn't have any sending unit for the cardiac rhythm that you'd attach the EKG electrodes to the patient. But out there at the desk, you could flip on the monitor for that unit. Now, this desk monitor it probably came over on the Mayflower. This was an early version. And every once in a while you get a rhythm from that room. Well, there's nothing sending it from in there. Well, we just thought that was funny because, we had a telemetry unit downstairs, and this is the kind of unit where they have a Wi-Fi thing that they put on your chest and it sends a signal out so you can kind of like walk around. And we thought we were just getting bleed over from the signal. That used to be a big problem, and these days it's not as bad. Thinking about it. In other words, there's tremendous clues that there's something really bad going on here. So, but this is, we're oblivious. We're not really thinking about this. Well, I'm sitting there. It's getting towards midnight. I'm sitting there watching the rhythms. It's quiet. It's quiet as an ICU ever gets, which is not very quiet. And I watch Carol walk in that room. Didn't think anything about it. Turned the corner, went back towards the back where there was a bathroom and there was like a little bedside table with syringes and needles on it and all that. And I'm sitting there, and a few seconds later, I hear this whoosh, really loud. I mean, really, really loud. Boom. And I mean, I think even the floor shook a little bit. It's like, whoa, what was that? And we all sort of froze, and we're like, and then she started screaming. That gets your attention. So TRE and me and the other 3 or 4 or 5 people that we had there, all of us rush in the room. There she is lying on the floor with this heavy wooden door from the bathroom laying on top of her, pushing her down to the floor. Okay, this isn't something you see all the time. So me and one of the other nurses picked the door up, and it was heavy. It took both of us to get it off of her. And TRD and the other nurses got Carol up, and she had some bumps and bruises, and she was really freaked out. Oh my God, I was just getting something, and all of a sudden this thing, next thing I know, I'm on the floor with this door on top of me. It's like, yeah, okay. All freaked out. So TRD sent her down to the emergency room to get checked out, and I called the engineers and said, hey, come up here, and we need you. So they came up, we told them what happened. They went in there and looked at the door, and they said, well, no wonder it fell. I said, why? I said, well, someone pulled the hinge pins. I walked in there and looked down, and on the floor, there's like 3 or 4 little hinge pins all lined up neatly at the bottom of the door. It's like, why would somebody do that? I don't know. Maybe they needed this door for some other place in the building, and they pulled the hinge pins to pull it, and then it got to be quitting time, so they just left, and they'll finish it tomorrow. Really? And they're going, that is about the speed of this place. I'm going, yeah, that is about the speed of that place. So I thought, okay, that's weird, but, okay, that's an excuse. That's a story that possibly could have happened. So, okay, we'll go on from there. Well, they get the door rehung. They leave. We didn't talk about it. We're like, okay, that was weird. We got other things to do, so we went back to work. Just before 7 o'clock, day shift is in. Now, when the next shift comes in the medical field, you don't just leave. You have to give report. You have to tell the person who's replacing you or taking over your position for the next shift. Okay, this patient did this patient did that. We're waiting on doctor's orders for so-and-so. This piece of equipment doesn't work, da-da-da-da. All the things that they need to know to do true continuity of care. Now, Carol had come back from the emergency room sometime during the night. They didn't find anything physically wrong with her. She took a 2-hour lunch break and still wasn't real super happy, but she was there. Well, we're sitting there giving a report, and I'm sitting there talking to my replacement from day shift, and then I see, out of the corner of my eye, I see Carol walking back towards that room. And that's when I turned and said, hey, let me tell you what happened to Carol last night. And I was literally just saying this. When I saw her walk into that room, this time she didn't even really walk all the way into it real well. Just inside the doorway, there was like a piece of equipment or something she needed from the table right there. As God is my witness, I watched, and so did everybody else in that unit, probably all 24 of us, watched the doorway from that bathroom come across the floor at a high rate of speed. Woof, like that. Slam into Carol and slam her up against the wall and pin her to the wall. And we're all watching this. And I remember, it's one of those where you're like, am I really seeing what I'm seeing? And then she starts screaming. And the minute she started screaming, the door fell off, boom, landed on the floor again. We're just all frozen because we're like, wow. She runs out. She's screaming. She grabs her purse. She runs out the door. We all just sort of watch her go. And I never saw or heard from her again. TRD said that no one ever did. She literally ran to her car and left, and probably left the city. And we all sort of looked at each other going, did you see that? Yeah, we saw that. Did you see that? Yeah, I saw that. Never really talked much about it. Later on, many years later, after TRD and I got married, we would talk about it every once in a while. And her idea was that it was, back in the day, it was an old nurse that had died and was upset that she was stealing medication or something. No, there's no old nurse. There's just demons. They hated her like they hate all of us. but they had access to her because God allowed them to have access to her for some reason. Don't know why, but it's there. Book of Job is full of this. Why is God allowing this? Because he is. He is sovereign. Demons can't do anything to you unless God allows them to. And they can only do as much as he allows them to. And he's not going to allow a Christian to be destroyed. Non-Christians. You watch people doing these destructive things to themselves, and you just watch them go downhill and downhill. And God's trying to get their attention. That's what he's doing. He was trying to get Carol's attention. I think he got it. I don't know what happened to her, but I hope it was good. But that's a true story. That really happened. More than that happened in that room, and I'll talk more about that later. Hopefully I'll get TRD in here to tell one of her stories about what else went on in that room when I wasn't working there, when I wasn't present. And tell me something. If this is the kind of content you want, just tell me. If you want to hear more ghost stories, great. If you don't want to hear any more, great. If you want me to talk specifically about one thing or another, if you just enjoy me telling stories, that's great. That's what I'm here for. This is my hobby. I'm not trying to sell you anything. All these things in the description, like, my shirt today, came from Fireman Up, and I think it was a limited edition, Timeout KGE 365, which is a reference to my favorite old TV show, Emergency, in color. I'm not getting anything for this. The only thing I got down there is if you want to buy me a cup of coffee, there's a link. You can send me virtually a cup of coffee, and I'd appreciate that because I'm a coffee hound. I'm just doing this because I'm old, I'm retired, very physically restricted. I'm crippled in a number of ways. And I just enjoy talking about history. I just enjoy telling stories. So let me know what you think. What is it? Like, subscribe, and comment. I think that's what it is. Yeah, love to read it. Give me some feedback. Let me know what you want to know. And next time up, I'm going to get back to talking about pure history. I want to talk about the writing of history and how it's written and why it's done a certain way. And I have some more stories about paramedic stories and ghost stories and history stories and all that. Just let me know what you want. And I'm glad to help. And thank you so much for spending some time here at the Cranky Old Historian. Until next time, take care of yourself.